No one talks smack anymore.
Yeah, we'll wait.
I forgot to change the YouTube title before.
It's just national gun registration. Okay, so that's not. Oh, probably soon. Considering. Yeah.
Corey, have you pushed the links yet?
No.
Okay. You have the ones from last week, by the way? I don't know if we ever did those on the website.
I don't know. I can do it when I get home tonight, or if you want.
Yeah.
I'm going to be up there. So I'm
Joe's
gonna
pieces are 10 to 12 people. We have 19 wanting to go, not including executives. So probably 25 people that want to go, and only 10 to 12 can go. So how do you want to handle that?
I figured you figured this out because you're kind of the leader, so that's been kind of.
Yeah, it is.
You talked to them, you've been.
Cut people's heads off without your say. So how do you want to approach this?
It's within your wheelhouse. I can't micromanage everything that happens here.
It's my decision to decide who goes to US Bank and who doesn't. That is not how that works.
Timing.
I would feel like that if that's anyone's purview, if it's not yours, it's not yours.
Yeah.
But he did.
I reached out
about correspondence. Like outreach.
I think it's more.
I still feel
it should be more of a group decision.
What did maybe just put together like guidelines and
Well, we said first come, first served, so it's going to be that.
Okay, so we got a timestamp for when people sign up.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll just, are you able to put together like before the end of the meeting, just to, and we can ask, can you still go? And we can, if they can, we can book the next person.
Yeah. So then position. We'll talk about that outside our general meeting.
So it should be
Yeah, we're gonna.
That's what I was
Ideally, we should have tomorrow. Yeah, I would say tomorrow. We should have by the end of the day tomorrow.
But you can talk about
busy week last.
Yeah, we should decide how people are tonight, and then try to contact them today. Let the people know. That's true.
All right, I think we'll go ahead and kick things off here.
Hold on.
Oh, never mind. I don't think we'll kick things off here.
Okay, now just refresh the slides.
All right. There you go. It's getting dark earlier now, man.
Huh?
I don't like it when it gets dark earlier.
Do you want me to bring up the window so that it like emphasizes how dark it is out there?
And how dark and dreary it's been for like the last fucking 3 days.
So nice.
Ugh.
It's not so shady.
What's up, Grace? We'll wait 3 more minutes, actually. Okay, this...
Don't forget to fill out the sign-up sheet.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely. So, how many of you, it's your first time with us at a meeting? Yeah, not you, Greg. You've been here. So, yeah, if it's not your first time here, that you probably already know about our Slack. Hop on our Slack, and we'll have the sign-up sheet posted there. If you could, just sign up onto that sheet. That helps us with, if we're doing social events or we're going out to a trip like we are this Friday to US Bank. It helps if we see, who's coming to a lot of the meetings and whatnot, and who's kind of active. And it also helps us get a gauge on how many people are showing up so we can maybe get a bigger room or whatnot, or more funding. What's up, man? That's great. Give it to 635. Anybody have any exams coming up? I'm totally out of the loop.
This Friday,
No.
2.
This Friday, you have an exam at 2?
I know I have 2 exams.
You have 2 exams. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Is the outreach and slides?
Huh?
Is talking about outreach to look at slides to the cookies? Slides today?
Not in there. Go through some free ones then. Do we have a date on that yet?
He is not, I suggested Sundays to him. I was thinking just like 3 times this semester, so I think it's just far out of your training. Tentative date. Is this somebody? Yes. Tentative date is like October. That's what they suggested. Just to let people know about it, ask for,
Yeah.
It is. Last week was 69. Crazy.
Time flies. All right, 6:35. Let's see. And I timed it perfectly just for Evan, just so all of you know. I was waiting.
It's all they had to start late.
Yeah. All right. Welcome to meeting 70. We're going to talk about networking and basic attribution tonight, or I guess not really basic attribution, but basic security. Probably needed to change that on the slide. Anyway, I don't think anyone here is new. Is anybody here, first meeting here? No? Okay. So just some announcements. I guess we're going to let Mike run over some of these announcements here. He's our secretary.
Some quick announcements. This Friday, we were invited to go to the U.S. Bank, their cyber operations center. So there was a sign-up sheet for that went out not too long ago, and there's a very tight amount of people that we can bring. So we'll get back to you later this week, probably tomorrow, about who will be able to go and stuff like that if you signed up for that. Remember, there's a Chipotle fundraiser coming up. I guess mark the calendars, 3 to 4 on November 4th.
All y'all better buy some Chipotle November 3rd. Plenty of ample time, plenty of ample updates.
Yeah, we've done that, 3 meetings in a row.
Yeah.
And then if you guys got nothing going on this weekend, we're not the only people who do hackathons, obviously, so stop by. Make UC is hosting a hackathon in Baldwin 755 from 9 to 9. So I guess you guys can work on anything. I think they're providing Raspberry Pis and a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
so.
they provide a lot of equipment. How many of you have been to a hackathon before? No. So you haven't been to a hackathon. It's a great time. It's free food, free toys to tinker around with, and then prizes at the end. And it's just a great time to just sit down and get something done, or just try to work on a project or whatever. I'm going to be working on the lab.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, even if you
want
only
to
got
help,
like a couple hours, just stop by. They'll let you use any piece of their equipment and just mess around,
But definitely sign up. I think there's been some sign-up links sent out to, I think, the whole undergraduate student body or whatever. But we'll post another link in Slack if any of you are wanting to register and don't know how to register. Just post a little ping in general, and I'm sure we'll get something to you.
Then I guess something else for your free time. The NSA Codebreaker Challenge has officially started. I believe, didn't we hold like some sort of record or something like the first for like a certain amount of time?
We were #1 for like 30 minutes. I don't know. It was just because we had like 14 people complete the first task. And then somebody else.
Not even the first, the 0th task.
The 0th task, yeah. And then somebody from like Stanford completed the whole thing or whatever. So
yeah.
Carnegie Mellon
and somewhere else have done the whole thing already.
It's insane.
Yeah, so I guess we got some free time. That's something fun to do. And then also there's some outreach with Lakota East.
I can talk
Yeah.
Okay, so I've been speaking with Lakota East. I'm still trying to get all the details for that on exactly when. But we did some outreach with them last year, and they really loved it, and they've actually decided to ask us back again this year. And they wanted to do something a little bit more involved. So what we're planning is we're going to go in, we're going to do like several training sessions with them, and then we're going to run like a CTF or a capture the flag operation for them sometime either at the end of the school year or the end of the semester. We haven't figured out when yet. So if you have any interest in helping out with that, I know I've had a couple of people already offer to help me put together content for that. So feel free to talk to me or someone in the outreach committee.
Yep. Definitely outreach is a lot of fun. I always enjoy going out to high schools and whatnot and talking about cool shit. So if any of you are interested, definitely come talk to students about cool shit.
I think you've also had a couple of success stories too, where people got inspired by one of your talks and then
I
came
don't
to
know.
ask
I don't
about
think
that?
it was me. I think it was
there
just
was one
cool
kid.
stuff. It was Robbie. Robbie was
Yeah.
his name. He came to UC because he liked what we talked to him about on our visit to, I think it was Lakota East.
Yeah.
So, but I think he's busy. Can't make the meetings. Anyway, we'll go move on to the last two here. I'll cover the elections. Since we have our elections in the fall, we're pretty much trying to organize a date when we're going to actually hold our elections this semester. So I just kind of wanted to throw this out there as like, hey, if you're looking to take on a leadership role or, want to just get more involved in any way, definitely think about running for one of our positions in outreach, public affairs, content and information, recruitment and retention, and content and info. Did I say that?
You covered that finance?
Finance, yeah. So one of our 5 committees. Definitely check it out, but it's gonna be a while before we have some more information. It's definitely something I'm working on because this will be our first time really running true elections, as we're only a little over a year old. So this is it's a big moment in the maturity.
Someone could run and overthrow AJ as president.
Yeah, overthrow me, please. Come on, let's go. And then last it's like National Register to Vote Day.
It is.
I don't know. Has anybody else heard about this? Yeah?
It's just a day.
Yeah, go to vote.gov and register to vote. If you don't, have
Vote on
your
Snapchat
registration set
also.
up.
Especially if you're
Do it on Snapchat. Wow.
if you've just become 18 recently and this will be your first eligible election, definitely need to register.
Yep, it's always important. All right, so with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Corey for some of the weekly content. Take it away on man.
All right. First story I'm going to talk about. Does anyone here know about what the Mirai Botnet was? Okay, just a couple of you. All right. So basically, what happened is this group of 3 guys in like Pennsylvania or whatever made this botnet, and a botnet is basically this malware. It goes out. It breaks into devices that have typically weak security. These IoT devices, they're still connected to the internet, but they aren't like personal computers. They aren't desktops. They aren't laptops
Can
or
be.
your phone.
That's IoT is the new thing with botnets. Botnets can be desktop. That's sort of the.
I mean, they can be, yes, but typically a lot of times it's these things. It'll be like security cameras, routers, things that are a little less likely for it to be noticed that they got hacked. That's actually an FBI agent was looking into DVRs. That was how Mirai Botnet was first found, actually. Mirai, for anyone in here who might be a weeb, is named after the anime Mirai Nikki. I just find that funny. So these guys were going to be sentenced this like past week, and because of strong recommendations from the FBI and the Department of Justice, they managed to get off with jail time, something like $127,000 in fines, like total between the 3 of them, and like 2,500 hours of community service. So, but considering the amount of damage that the Mirai Botnet caused, it took down an entire like top-level domain name server for hours.
It basically took down a lot of people's internet on the East
Yeah, so they managed to get away with this because of extraordinary cooperation with the government was the cited reason. They went through and they helped the FBI to identify a lot of other cyber criminals. One of the developers they specifically cited had logged like several hundred hours specifically, like just helping the FBI. So maybe they served their time, kind of.
They saved my ass.
But what's also notable is that these same guys are also picking up jobs in the cybersecurity industry, which is something that you'll tend to see a lot. You know, someone goes out, they make
really nasty piece of malware, and then after they get out of jail or whatever, suddenly someone picks them up.
You write a book.
You write a book, you get a job as an analyst, whatever. So you might have heard that these guys apparently only wrote the botnet to DDoS Minecraft servers. That may have been their original purpose in writing it, but seeing as we found out that they were actually selling the Mirai Botnet services as DDoS service, not their real reason for using it.
The only thing I'll buy DDoS for is
Yeah.
Minecraft server.
Part of why Mirai Botnet actually got to be so bad is because as the FBI was closing in on them, they wanted to try and distance themselves from it, and so they actually just released the source code online, and that spawned up a bunch of copycat versions of Mirai. That was actually why it was so bad. Newegg got hacked last month, as we just found out. For a period of like 4 or 5 days, every payment made to Newegg, whether it was mobile or desktop or whatever, was credit card skimmed. So if you made a payment to Newegg in that time frame, you should probably contact your card provider and get that canceled and request a new card because someone's got it. This has potentially affected millions of purchasers because they get over 50 million visitors a month at Newegg, unique visitors, so if even just a fraction of them make a purchase, that's a lot of people. I thought this was really interesting though, is because the JavaScript that they managed to insert into the payment page was only something like 15 lines of script, which is like unbelievably small when you compare it to like the next malware I'm going to show you, which is like just immense. So, if anyone remembers from, what was it, 2 weeks ago now, when we talked about APTs, this was developed by, or we're attributing it to a Chinese APT called Iron Group or Rock. This is this really weird sort of fusion of malwares that we've actually been seeing a lot more since the crypto mining started to get really popular. A few months after that, we started to see these weird little hybrids. And so what this does is it's capable of doing ransomware, which if you are infected with this or you know someone who got infected with this, don't let them pay because it doesn't actually have decryption features in the malware, so you will not get your data back regardless of whether or not you pay. It's got botnet services, it's got worm services, so it can self-propagate, it's got crypto mining, it can affect both Windows and Linux. I believe I don't remember, but I think they said that it infected like a fairly large number of machines already. It was developed in Python, and it's using something called PyInstaller to turn that into an executable, and that's actually made it fairly difficult to detect because it's different for every like version of operating system. So what PyInstaller does is it's just kind of like, as it's making these executable files, it gets obfuscated from what it originally looked like. And these are my recommended readings for the week. This top one here, it's talking about hackback. For those of you who might know about it, there was a bill that made it through the House. I don't know if it's made it through the Senate yet. That would allow companies, if they are being hacked or they have reason to believe they are being hacked, would give them permission to hack back at the one attacking them. This can cause a lot of problems. For example, the current records for DDoS attacks were done through reflection, which is basically I say, hey, send me this packet. By the way, my address is whoever it is you're looking to DDoS. And so you send that to all these really big servers, and then suddenly they start to flood this poor victim with just these massive servers sending back packets. Scan4U. So we talked to you guys about VirusTotal already. This guy ran a very similar website. He was just sentenced to 14 years of jail time because, unlike VirusTotal, he doesn't actually share the files that he determines whether or not anti-malware softwares can catch it. He doesn't share those uploads to antivirus providers, and it was determined that he knew reasonably what people were using his site to do, and so he got jail time for that. Twitter was sharing direct messages with developers that weren't supposed to be seeing those direct messages through their API. There's this like 4G Wi-Fi router thing you can get. It's got a vulnerability. the Pegasus, it's an Android and iOS malware hacking tool, has hit something like 53 million like hacks or something. I don't know. It's like something crazy. Like there's a lot of vulnerable devices, and there's a Windows 0 day. Okay, so on to the topic for the week. We're going to be talking about networking, and just to kind of start off with what it is. It's probably fairly obvious from the name, but you got these interconnected groups of computers, and they're able to share information and resources through each other. And that's just kind of the basis of what networking is. Information is shared by taking, you write an email. We don't just wrap that up into a cylinder and just shove that in a tube and it goes off. That gets broken down into packets, these little pieces of data, just a couple of bits or bytes, and we send those off, and we wait until it makes it to the receiver, and that receiver assembles those packets into whatever message it's supposed to be, and then maybe it sends a response, whatever. So just going into a little bit about how those packets get from place to place. Maybe this is, where's my mouse? Okay. So like, let's say this is my computer, and I'm looking to send a response to this computer over here, I guess. I write an email, and it breaks that down into a bunch of packets, and it rolls that up into something called the OSI model, which we'll cover in just a second, and it traverses. Let's say this is my router, I guess, and it goes from my router to some higher level server, something maybe like, let's say my service provider is, I don't know, Phi Optics. So it goes up and it goes up and it goes up through all these layers until it reaches Phi Optics, which is just like top level server. And it says, oh, well, that's actually on, I don't know, AT&T's network or something. And so it transfers it to AT&T, and that goes down and down and down. It reaches my intended recipient's router, and it goes into their machine.
Yeah, let me make one little point here too. Yeah, so along the way, we're talking about different hosts here, and this is like different subnets, or essentially it's considered notation. Don't want to get too down in the weeds here, but for those of you that this concept of networking and how it actually works is a brand new thing, you can really think about it, just kind of take off that 24. That's like an address for your house. And, that's kind of saying where something is on the network, and you're sending it to that address.
It might be easier
most basic level.
If I just talked about IP addresses now, maybe?
Or
you can probably.
Could. I think that's like just a little taste.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's probably good for now. So the OSI model, it's composed of these 7 layers, and this is just kind of how we know where your packet needs to go, how we know how to handle your packet. It's broken down into each of these 7 layers. So at the most basic layer is this, it's called the physical layer. This is just kind of how we know where and in what way to move the bits of this packet from like one end of the piece of hardware, for example, a router, how we move it from the incoming port to the outgoing port that it needs to get to. Data link layer is just how we're going to get it from the outgoing port of your router to the ingoing port of the next router. The network layer is how we know which routers to go through. The transport layer is saying, here's where I initially came from, this is where I want to end up. And then really the rest of these 3 are just not that important because they're much more software focused.
And they're not necessarily super important in necessarily the big grand scheme of things, but they're important when you're assessing, an application to see exactly,
yes,
what is this application talking to? Or if I have a computer that's reaching out to a malicious IP address or something that's been flagged as malicious, then, we would want to look at what application is making those calls and why, what it's doing.
And for just I say they're not important. I mean, like, for the purposes of introducing you to networking, we could spend like hours and hours just going into depth on like each layer of the OSI model. Hopefully this analogy will help. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry, this is the wrong slide.
Yeah, I want to talk about this too really quick. So, a lot of like today's like content of our meeting is just really focused on like these basic networking concepts, because a lot of our topics that we're going to be getting into kind of require everybody to have some basic level of knowledge on networking in the OSI model. So here's kind of a nice way to visualize it, and also a nice way to just see how it's kind of broken up. So like Corey said, bits are on the physical level. You have your frames on the data link level. And on the data link level, it says right here you have your MAC addressing and LLC, but we'll focus on MAC addressing here. Who knows what a MAC address is? Yeah, MAC, it's the physical address for your machine. So you can have a unique physical address. You can spoof your MAC address, but you can have a unique physical address tied to an IP address that you're currently assigned, which would be the network level, the path determination and IP. The transport is getting you there. The networking level here with the packets, I mean, if you've seen tools like Wireshark, or if you've looked at the NSA Codebreaker Challenge, Task 0, they give you a packet capture, so you have some packets to actually look at, and you can see kind of one person talking to another person, one IP talking to another IP. And then this is why we said this is a lot of application-based, is that this is all just data. This is your inter-host communication, how it's going to be presented and encrypted, and then how your application is pretty much going to ingest it. So,
and if we say anything that does not seem clear, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll do our best to clarify for you too. But
any questions on this?
Hopefully, if you maybe aren't 100% clear, like hopefully this image will help clear it up. This personally is how I think of the OSI model. Here we've got like, you know, the biggest encapsulation of everything. We've got the physical layer, and then within that, I have the data link layer until we move on, you know, transport layer, until we get to the application layer, which is just like the data that the application works with, and then each of these is just within the other. It's not necessarily one sitting on top of the other. It's one enclosed by the other. So that took me a little while to get to, and it was as soon as I thought of this imagery that maybe not these specific nesting dolls, but Russian nesting dolls is what really helped me with that. So we're going to talk about, you guys have probably all seen your IP address before, but you may not necessarily know the difference between different types of address. So right here is probably the one you've already seen. I don't know how easily visible it is. There's another projector in the back there that's easier to see. So this is an Ipv4 address. It's composed of 32 bits, and that was actually kind of a problem a few years ago, and I'll get into why in just a second. And then there's Ipv6, which is a little bit more complicated. It's bigger. It's like 128 bits. And so the reason why that's important is because a few years ago, we actually were coming across this problem where we were actually running out of unique Ipv4 addresses to use. Even though there's something like 4.3 billion possible addresses, well, the size of the internet, the number of devices connected to the internet was roughly doubling every year. And it was like the early 2000s, we were in the hundreds of millions already. So they started working on something called Ipv6, which has more bits and therefore more potentially unique addresses.
I think Ipv6 has like more possible addresses than there are like grains of sand on Earth.
Yeah, no, it's more than, it's like more, it's like it's like 1,000 or something like that.
It's insane. It's just an absolutely
I don't know, it's
massive.
It's this number, 3.4 times 10 to the 38. It's big. For the foreseeable future, like multiple world colonization, we have enough.
Once we start,
we have enough devices.
Galaxies, maybe.
Yeah. I don't recall. I didn't see anything on this just because I was trying to put together something real quick for this slide, but I believe that your IPv6 is composed of something like your MAC address mixed with like your DHCP IP address.
It's something to do with like your physical MAC address and a couple other things. At least the physical MAC address determines something like the first two. They're not octets, but the first two.
Yes.
I guess something that would be interesting to talk about. If I might be hopping ahead, and I might be getting too complex, but I want to talk about the octets, how IPs, if you're 4 octets.
I wasn't really gonna go into that, but go ahead. I mean, that's not.
Well, I'll let you do your thing, and then I'll talk about it.
Okay, I mean that was pretty much what I was going to talk about for IP addresses.
Okay.
So you can go ahead and get
All
into
right,
that.
Cool. All right, yeah. So go back a slide. Another slide. To that one where you have the overlay. Okay. So we're going to talk about why your IP addresses look like this. So they're essentially each an octet. So you have values from 0 to 255 on each possible little section. So this is 1 octet, it's another octet, another octet, it's the last octet, right? When you say /24, you say the only things that can have different IP addresses in this network is my last octet. Because 8 times 3, 24, you have 8, what is it? It's like it's 8 to the 8 possibilities here, to the 8. Because it's all based on binary. All based on binary. So you're basically saying when I do /24 and I'm blocking out, I'm saying the only thing that can change in my network is this one here. So for all the computers, if all of us were on the same imaginary network here in this room here, we would have probably maybe a /24, and then I would be like 2, and he'd be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way back. If this was something different than a 24, you would have more space in these octets to use. This is kind of a hard concept to communicate effectively.
I guess,
but it's how we organize different ranges on IPv4, which is pretty important when you're trying to analyze.
Yeah. So I believe it's like. The way I like to think about it, whenever you see this, normally you're going to see it's like this network has this range of IP addresses. So you'll see, and then it'll have that / and it's just like, and then whatever the last 8 bits are, 24 bits or whatever, are variable. So you could see, again, numbers 0 to 255, or if maybe it's /32 is another one you'd see. So that's that like half. So it's like half of the octet before it.
/32 would be 1 unique address.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It just says how many
bits you're allowed to play with. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's more. It gets more advanced. That's more of the advanced look at things. But think on that.
So, when you come and you sign into a network, for example, when you sign into UC Secure, you don't have to ask for an IP address. And you never have to worry about getting an IP address that's already been assigned, which can cause a lot of problems with messages going to the wrong machines and stuff, if that happens. And the reason why that doesn't happen is because when you connect to UC Secure, they use something called Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. And what that does basically is I connect to a network and I say, hey, I don't have an IP address, give me one. And I communicate that to whatever the DHCP server is. Normally, it's just whatever router you're connected to. So I send that message out to the router, and it's like, let's see here. Let's look at my little table here of IP addresses that have been assigned to me. And, this IP address is not in use right now. I'm going to assign it to you. And that might refresh or it might change over time. But you've got this rolling IP address. It's whatever the DHCP server says you have.
I mean, and that's probably how most of your home wireless networks are set up with a DHCP. So when somebody comes into your house and connects to your Wi-Fi network and you give them the password to pop on, they don't have to be like, this is the IP address that I want. You don't have to go and say, okay, so we have 192.168.0. something through 255, and you don't have to go through all the pain and saying, okay, well, I know I have addresses 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 taken, so you're going to be 8. Your DHCP server will just go ahead and say, oh, well, what do I have to play with here? What is already used? And I'll go ahead and dilly out what I'm not using. So it's a way to hand out IP addresses, essentially. So it's a way to get your IP address.
And the other way of going about it is to have static assignment for IP addresses. You go and you connect to a network and you say, this is the IP address I'm using. and that can cause problems because you might assign yourself an IP address that's already in use. So DHCP makes things a lot easier for you. Problems can come from using it though. For example, let's say I bought a domain or a website name and I've set it up to work specifically with this IP address, and then suddenly next time you connect to your router, it gives you a different IP address. Suddenly your website doesn't connect to you anymore. Oh no. So there are reasons why you choose to use a static IP address, but normally DHCP is probably what you're going to use.
DHCP, the reason why you might get assigned different IP addresses is because when a DHCP server says this is what your address is, it gives you a lease. And you can pretty much specify the time length of that lease. So you can say, for everybody on my network, whenever they join, they get an IP, and then 24 hours later, they have to say, I'm still on your network, give me another IP, and they'll either get given the same IP or a new IP. So if you had a special, like Corey said, special application running on your laptop, and you said, okay, well, if I need to access my computer or access this application from another computer in my house, well, I'd want to remember its address to be able to get to it, but its address could change with DHCP, and then you have to go back and get it. So that's where the idea of having a static IP is super helpful, because it's not going to change. You know exactly what it will be all the time.
So AJ actually brought up, like he kind of brushed against the topic that we're going to talk about now when he mentioned you go home and you get your IP address. He said 192.168.1.1 or whatever, and you might all think, oh, that sounds really familiar. Whenever I'm at home or back home with my parents, that's really similar to the IP address I've got. 192.168. something something. The reason why so many different computers can have that address, despite the fact that suddenly, oh no, which address goes to which computer? If 1,000 people have 192.168.1.1, how do we know which one we're trying to get to? The reason why that happens is because of network address translation. It's something that was thought up when we realized we're running out of available IP addresses in IPv4, but IPv6 had not yet been developed completely. It was in the works, but it wasn't out yet. And what this does basically is there's a lot of different ways it can be done, static, dynamic, overloading, and overlapping. And this link here, if you follow it, it goes more in depth on the topic of network address translation, and it's got illustrations to follow each different kind. I'm going to talk specifically about overloading, because that's the one I know best, and it's what most people typically think of whenever I hear them talking about NAT. So what happens is, on my computer, I sign in, I get an IP address, and then I want to send a message out. And what happens is my message goes up to my router, and my router then translates that IP address from my IP address. It remembers the port that my information came in on, and it then translates the IP address on that message to whatever its IP address is, and it sends it on a specific port. And then when the response comes back to my router, it translates it back to my IP address and sends it back on the port that it came in on. So basically, you can then have, theoretically, at every router level, 4.3 billion different IP addresses at every layer. So I've got address 192.168.1.1 on my computer, and then my router's IP address might be 192.168.1.0, but to the outside world, it might be 192.178.1.1, and then the router above it and the router above it, and it continually translates these addresses.
So essentially, you have your IP that is assigned to your device, and NAT allows you to say, when anybody touches this IP, redirect it to this other IP range. So you could say that to the world, you will refer to me as 172.10.16.72 or something. But when anybody from the rest of the world hits that, and that traffic goes into your network, then you can kind of, it's put into your network, which is 10.10 6.8.1. So it allows you to be referenced as another IP. So many people can have these different little subnets where you can have a 192.168.1.1 at your house and somebody else can too, without them overlapping. We don't have a unique IP address for every single person.
Yeah, it's going to be.
IPv4 is not big enough.
This is that website I was talking about, and it's going to be hard to see, just because this isn't like the biggest picture. That's probably about as big as I'm going to get it without blotting it out. But you can see these addresses. So you got 192.168.32.10, .32.12, .32.15, and they all communicate up to whatever their router is. And those messages come out as .123.100 for all of their IP addresses, but they're going out on separate ports. So 101, 102, 103.
Could also be viewed as VLANs, but that's a whole nother.
Yeah. And so when those messages come back, this message that went out as IP address .123.100 on port 101 is going to come back to port 101, and your router is going to know, okay, that translates back to my internal IP address of 168.32.10. The information comes back to port 102, and it knows to translate that to .32.12.
Do you have the HDMI hooked up to, Hayden? Could I share my Mac? Yeah.
Is anyone confused about any of these
Yeah,
topics?
there's a lot of numbers getting thrown around, and networking isn't the easiest thing to convey through speech. But we definitely are going to have more hands-on stuff. This is like more of a lecture-style meeting as opposed to our other hands-on meetings, just because we need to throw out all this information before we start.
So are you going to
be more hands-on? No, you can keep going.
Well, I'm just going to move on to the next slide.
Okay, well, what's the next slide?
I don't know, it's the security, I think.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect. Then go ahead, do that, and then after he shows you some of this, I'll show you my my home security setup, and I'll show you what it looks like with DHCP leases. I'll be able to show you about some of these other technologies that we're talking about right now too.
So we've given you a little bit of an introduction to what networks are and a little bit about how they communicate, but this is a cyber security and cyber offense featured club. So how would you protect yourself? Might be, wandering around in there. And there's two real types of protection you can do at the network level. One of them is an intrusion detection system, and the other is an intrusion prevention system. So detection systems are basically, they're looking out. They're not trying to do anything. They're just looking and saying, this looks suspicious, and it'll alert you in some way. Maybe it just makes a log file, whatever. And it says, hey, I see something that looks weird. Take a look at this. Maybe there's an intruder. Whereas intrusion prevention systems, these are a little bit you might be more familiar with. This is like a firewall. This is actively trying to prevent things from happening that might be an intruder. So, for example, if you know that you will never do IPv6 traffic, and suddenly someone's trying to communicate to you through IPv6, well, if you just firewall all IPv6 traffic and say, I'm not allowing any of that, you've prevented them from being able to intrude on your network that way.
So there's some common tools that are used, like in the industry, for doing this on a larger level. Typically, you're going to be working with an IDS in the industry. You're not going to be working with an IPS all the time. If you're probably going to be doing firewalling more than you're going to be running an IDS and IPS mode. So essentially, the benefit of using an intrusion detection system is that you can let traffic pass through it, and then you can go back and log everything that happens. You can tear apart these packets. You can extract special information out of these packets. Say your corporate network, and you have an email server, and your employees send email. You could, with an IDS, specifically like Suricata, you can write specific rules that say, if I see any SMTP traffic, any emails, I'm going to rip out that text, and I'm going to analyze it to see if they're leaking classified information. So intrusion detection systems can operate in a number of different ways. I'll go ahead and show you what I have set up at my house called pfSense, and I'm actually running Suricata. Let's see here. Okay, scaling, it's thinking. All right. Whoa, too much. All right, so you can see here, can everyone see this all right? This is my home's WAN address. So that's publicly seeable by the internet, and through NAT, it's getting translated to the 10.6.9.1 domain, which I am assigning all of my devices in my house under 10.6.9. Whatever else is next. I can show you that. I can show you DHCP in action on these DHCP leases. So right now you can see in real time at my house what's on my network. So here's, what am I, this is my Nextcloud or whatever. And it has a DHCP lease at 10.6.9.243. So that's the IP it's at right now. I don't think that's static. It would say so. So essentially, here's what your router sees when it's assigning things DHCP. So here are some of my more statically assigned. You can tell over here where it says static. So you can see all of my other devices that we actually have specific IPs for on our network. Like Xbox Ones and stuff. So that is DHCP visualized.
AJ, real quick before you continue, maybe talk about the fact that you've got an IP address in your address bar on your browser. Can you just explain that a little bit?
About this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to get too complicated, but I am using a VPN, virtual private network, my own that I set up.
We'll talk about that more.
We could talk about that more too, yeah. To get into my home network, and just like you guys access your router settings, I'm sure some of you have done it before. You type 192.168.1.1 or whatever into your address bar if you are on that wireless network, and you'll be able to see your router's interface. That's how I got to this page. That's my gateway. So let me show you, I can watch my traffic going in and out. Let me show you some of my firewall logs. So this is not the intrusion detection system, but I can see in real time here, these are IPs, externally IPs, so 112.4.161.110. That is attacking my home network, and it's trying to get into it on port 43,071. Here's another one on port 1433. I think that's like MySQL. So I can watch in real time who's trying to break into my network, or what botnets or what bots are scraping the web trying to ping and get in here. And unless you have a firewall running or some kind of defense up, I mean, you're kind of left a little susceptible.
Port 1433 is Microsoft SQL Server.
Huh. So then we have this, the Suricata alerts, and actually I'll get into it doing this. So Suricata is my intrusion detection system. So I'm not blocking any traffic, because if we're trying to go to a website to do homework or whatever, we don't want the firewall being like, you're not going there. That kind of looks sketchy. I'm gonna cut you off. Because we have, it's a house. We're not like a super secure corporate network. You got to balance convenience and security. It's kind of something that you can't have 100% of both. But you can see here, these are real attacks happening in real time. Not all of these are the scariest. So here's just potentially bad traffic, and this was a suspicious scan to my MySQL port 1433. So then I could go ahead and say, look at this IP. We can go to say virus total or main tools. I'll show you a little bit about if you were trying to analyze an attack on a network, and I know that's kind of not the idea of today's talk, but go ahead and show you this really quick. All right, so if I want to say, okay, who is that pinging my port? Let's see who it is. Just pop it on in there, and then virus total is free. I'll go ahead and start the search on that too. I think we brought this up to the chapter before, if you have like a malicious file or something that you don't trust a whole lot, you can always look it up on here. Oh, look at this. This is from China, and it's some internet infrastructure backbone over there, apparently. I'm sure when Domain Tools comes back, it'll give me more information if it comes back here.
Something I'd like to touch on is the fact that you're seeing AJ was able to just put in his IP, or not his, that IP address, and it searched it in the URL. That's because the difference between a domain name, like say Google or Facebook, and an IP address is actually not that different. Those domain names are all stored in things called domain name servers, and all those are links from names to IP addresses. So when I go into my browser and I type in google.com, what it does is it communicates out to these domain name servers and it says, hey, I'm looking to go to google.com, where's that at? And it's going to find an IP address that's associated with google.com, and it's going to communicate that IP address from me back to me, and it's going to go out.
So I guess this is about all I had to show. I showed you like a real live kind of intrusion detection and how to respond to it, and kind of how you use Suricata. I tried to show you guys, basic firewall, what it looks like, give you an idea of DHCP and how that functions and what it looks like on your router level. Yes?
What hardware are you using to host this?
What hardware am I using? So I have a custom built, I think it's Supermicro server in my house. So this is just a router I built myself, and any of you guys can do this too. This is free software. It's all free. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say I bought an old desktop computer at the UC Surplus sale, and I'm running PFSS on it just fine.
My man.
So I mean, you can. I don't think they do the Surplus sale anymore, but just
They
buy
just
a
ended
desktop,
it.
dude.
Yeah,
Just
they-
make them a flash drive or something. It's super easy.
Yeah, they just ended that. So if you want to have something like this, and I know like today was super basic level of networking, and I'm sure some of you know way more than that. Some of you are just getting interested or getting into this field. But I mean, we can do a deep dive on any one of these different tools, be it Suricata, be it how to do a VPN. Like here's me. That's my that is my WAN IP from UC right now.
Do you want to just go over VPN since that was the last topic?
Is that the last topic, VPN? Yeah.
So if we perhaps wanted this, could we come by the lab and you help us set it up?
I'd help you set up pfSense, yeah. I wouldn't want to give all the answers away because part of the fun is figuring it out, but I'll help you figure it out.
It can also be a little difficult, seeing as you won't be connected to your
Yeah.
network that you're planning to have PFSense run on probably.
So I guess since we're almost done here, I'll just end it and talk about my VPN and VPNs in general. So I have this service running on my router called OpenVPN, and we talked about network address translation. This is kind of a different form of it or whatnot. Here we have my or UC's address or my computer's address right now to the world, right? And this is some random port that I have my VPN server talking over. And since I have this set up to reach out and point at my wide area network address or my external address on my home setup, which just so happens to be this. Don't try anything, guys. Don't try anything. Just so happens to be that. When people hit that address, so I'll have this address. I'll say, hi, my house. So, okay, you have the proper certificates. You have the proper certs to connect. You have the proper credentials. All right, we'll go ahead and open up a tunnel for you, and we will treat you like you are in the house right now. But instead of you being in the house, you're going to be on a special VPN network, which is network address translated to be able to talk on the normal network. So I did 10.6.69. Whatever is if I'm on a VPN, that's the address I'm going to get, and I'm going to be able to talk within my my home network. So really basic, but VPNs, they have different certs, like certificates and different credentials that you pass with different levels of security based on the certificate that you choose. This we could spend a whole lot of time on. We haven't really talked much about protocols. Streaming applications are typically done over UDP. TCP is typically when you're hitting the Internet of Things. So I'm VPNing using UDP, creating that tunnel. I mean, OpenVPN is the technology. I could sit up here and probably bore the hell out of you guys about this way too long. But I guess with that, I mean, we're pretty much at time.
We do need to talk about a quick intro about what we're planning for next. So next week, we're gonna actually do a demo on networking. We aren't 100% sure what we're gonna do for that yet. We're still working on what we're gonna be able to bring for you guys. But it would be a good idea if you guys can install Virtualbox and set up some sort of Linux virtual machine. We'll try to be able to provide machines for you guys to use through our lab, but we aren't sure we'll be at that point yet. For all I know, we might just do a Wireshark demo that can use Windows, but I don't know yet because we haven't figured out what the demo is. So if you need any help installing Virtualbox, we do have YouTube videos on our channel. I apologize severely for the audio quality in the first one. I was using my laptop mic and it sounds like ass. But the second one sounds much better, and I'll be posting a third tutorial, but the first two are the only ones you really need.
You can go to our website and click guides, and they'll be right there.
So, I guess before y'all start heading out, packing up, does anybody have anything that they would like us to focus on in terms of networking, hands-on demos, or anything that we showed you tonight that you'd be interested in learning more on, that we can do a hands-on demo? Anything?
Okay.
All right, well then we'll get creative and have some fun. Yeah. But yeah, so I showed you remote access. You can do site-to-site VPNs, which essentially allow you to connect your entire network to another network all the time through stuff like Tink. But iVPN, for all of you that want a VPN service, you don't know what to do, don't know what to get, or haven't done a lot of research, iVPN, I think it's like $50 or $60 a year or something. It's a wonderful VPN service based out of Gibraltar, has different privacy laws, free dual hops, so you can hop between 2 different countries, free peer-to-peer support. Well, not free, you pay for the service. Peer-to-peer, so you can torrent over it. iVPN's awesome. That's what I use when I'm not VPNing into my house.
Yeah, just actually, because you brought it up, just a couple of really big networking topics that we didn't really have time to get into today are TCP versus UDP, and peer-to-peer versus like peer-to-server, or whatever it's called, person-to-server. Yeah.
Client server.
Yeah, that.
Peer-to-server, whatever.
Doesn't matter. So those are two really big networking topics that I just, again, didn't really have time for. So if you want to learn more about this, feel free to check that stuff out, or I don't know, maybe if you guys really want to come back to networking, we can do more on this later in the semester or next semester or something.
And I'm sorry this was more of a, I guess, lecture style meeting, not like our typical meetings, but, you know.
There was a lot of information to cover, and like I was just saying, we didn't get through everything in networking, but we will have something hands-on for you next week. That this is going to be a two-parter topic.
So, you guys already go to class all day. I don't want you to come here and feel like it's another fucking class. So definitely gonna have some more hands-on stuff. Yep, that was basically networking. If you have any questions about pfSense, if you have any questions about your own network security, feel free to come and ask me, Corey, or anybody. And with that, I guess we're all good.
Yeah, if you are having trouble installing and setting up VirtualBox, you can always stop by the lab on Monday, or just post in Slack, and we'll see what we can do to help you remotely.
Yeah, definitely get VirtualBox and like any Debian flavored Linux distro installed on it. If you have questions, post in questions on Slack.
Kali has a lot of really good tools pre-installed, so you can look into that, or Ubuntu's got an easy installation process.
We're torrenting on UC Secure.